Axel Vance, a seasoned scavenger with a rebellious streak, drifted through the cold expanse of space. His ship, a small battered freighter named the Rust Bucket, was a patchwork of old parts and luck. Axel didn't mind. He preferred to stay on the fringes of the galaxy, away from the big dangerous powers that ruled the stars. After all, he was no hero, just a guy trying to scrape by, getting his hands dirty and making a quick credit here and there. With his dark, tousled hair and sharp blue eyes, he had a knack for getting in and out of trouble without being caught. Until now. While navigating the asteroid belt, Axel stumbled upon something he hadn't expected. A strange, glowing distress signal. It came from an ancient, abandoned alien ship that had clearly been out of service for centuries. Intrigued and desperate for something to sell, Axel docked his ship near the wreck. He had no idea what he was getting into. He hadn't even bothered to check if the ship was safe. He figured it was just a pile of old tech. But the moment he stepped aboard, everything changed. The ship's interior was unlike anything Axel had ever seen. Towering, dark walls covered in alien symbols that pulsed with a strange energy. The air was thick, charged with an unsettling hum. Something was wrong. He reached out, touching the metal, and immediately alarms blared. Panic set in. The moment he heard the sound, he knew he was too late. Someone, or something, had detected him. Before he could make it back to his own ship, the lights in the corridors flickered out, and the hum intensified. Axel spun around, his pulse quickening. In a flash, figures appeared before him, their shapes hard to define in the darkness. They were tall, much taller than any human, and their bodies were covered in metallic armor. At first, Axel thought they were robots, but the moment they spoke, he realized they were something far worse. Human. One of them growled, its voice low and commanding. "You have entered the domain of the Hral." Axel's heart skipped. The Hral. He'd heard whispers of them, rumors of a brutal alien race known for their merciless conquests across the galaxy. He had no time to think. The guards grabbed him before he could react, dragging him toward the ship's command center. The Queen awaited him. Zurael, the feared Queen of the Hral, stood at the center of the throne room. She was a sight to behold. Her skin shimmered with a faint ethereal glow, her eyes a sharp, glowing red that seemed to pierce through Axel's very soul. Her long, dark hair cascaded down her back, and her armor, adorned with intricate designs, suggested power and elegance in equal measure. She regarded Axel with a mix of curiosity and cold calculation, her gaze unblinking as she sized him up. "You," she said, her voice carrying an authority that sent chills down Axel's spine. "You have triggered the beacon, and now you belong to me." Axel stood frozen, his mind racing for a way out. But there was no escape. The Hral were everywhere, and the Queen's cold, calculating eyes never left him. "What is this?" Axel demanded, his voice barely a whisper, though he fought to keep the fear from showing. "What do you want with me?" Zurael's lips curved into a thin, almost amused smile. "You are the one who triggered my signal, human. You are here because you are mine now. I have seen it in the stars. You will be my champion." Confused and desperate, Axel tried to make sense of what was happening. The last thing he had expected was to be swept up by the ruler of an alien empire, but there was no denying the strange pull in Zurael's gaze. He could sense something that made him hesitate, but that hesitation only made things worse. Before he could say another word, Zurael raised a hand, silencing him with a single motion. "I do not make mistakes," she declared, "and I will have you at my side." Axel was now faced with a terrifying reality. He had unknowingly captured the Queen's interest, and in doing so, had become trapped in a galaxy-spanning war he didn't understand. All he wanted was to survive. Now, it seemed like survival might just mean falling into the Queen of the Hral's strange, twisted affection. And if there was no way out, He would have to figure out how to survive without losing himself in the process. Axel Vance was now a prisoner on the Hrall flagship, the Empress's Wrath, a ship that seemed more like a moving fortress than anything else. The walls were made of dark metal, covered in glowing alien symbols that pulsed with energy. Everything about the ship was imposing, from the giant war machines in the hangars to the terrifying warriors who patrolled the corridors. Axel had expected to be thrown into a cell, left to rot, or maybe even executed. But instead, he found himself walking at the Queen's side through the ship, like some sort of prize trophy. The whole situation felt like a nightmare he couldn't escape. Zurael, the Queen, didn't seem to understand why Axel was so uncomfortable. To her, his presence wasn't a problem. It was an opportunity. She watched him closely, her red eyes never leaving him as they made their way to her private chambers. Axel couldn't help but feel like he was being hunted, even if Zurael's smile was cold and almost amused. She led him into a large, elegant room filled with alien artifacts, the glow of strange crystals lighting up the space. It should have felt like a palace, but to Axel, it felt like a cage. "Sit," Zurael commanded, her voice firm but not unkind. She gestured to a plush seat across from her throne. Axel hesitated, but after a moment, he sat down. His mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. He needed to escape, but it seemed like every exit was blocked by an army of Hrall warriors. Zurael took a seat across from him, her sharp gaze still locked onto him. "You may be wondering why you are here, human," she said, her voice softer now, almost like a velvet trap. "I saw something in you. Something the stars have been guiding me toward for a long time." Axel raised an eyebrow. Stars? What, like fate? He had never been the type to believe in destiny or some grand cosmic plan. To him, life was about surviving one day to the next. But as he looked into Zurael's glowing eyes, he couldn't deny that something about her words felt real. He quickly pushed the thought aside. There was no way he could trust her. "You may be confused," Zurael continued, leaning forward, "but you will understand soon. I need someone like you by my side. Someone clever, someone strong, someone who can help me unite the galaxy under my rule." Axel's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm going to help you take over the galaxy?" he asked, trying to sound confident. The thought of aiding a ruthless alien queen in her quest for power made his stomach turn. He had no desire to be part of whatever twisted empire she was building. "I'm no hero. I'm not some soldier you can use." Zurael's lips curved into a smile, but there was no humor in it. "You are more than you think, Axel Vance. I have been watching you. Your cunning, your ability to survive in the worst situations, these are qualities that cannot be ignored. You are the one who activated the distress signal after all. That alone shows you are different from others." Axel didn't like the sound of that. He had triggered the signal by accident, just looking for salvage. But it seemed like Zurael believed there was more to it. The idea of being caught up in something he didn't want was starting to feel real and terrifying. "I'm not interested in being part of your empire," Axel said, trying to stay firm. "You might be the queen of this ship, but I'm not your pawn. You can't control me." Zurael's expression softened, almost like she was, amused by his defiance. "You think you can escape, don't you?" she asked, her voice laced with an unsettling calmness. "But you are already mine, whether you like it or not. I will make sure of that." Axel stood up quickly, his instincts telling him to find an exit. But as soon as he moved, the room seemed to close in on him. The guards stationed outside had been waiting. They stepped forward, blocking the door, their cold eyes trained on Axel. Zurael watched with a calm smile. "Don't bother trying to escape. I have everything planned, Axel. There is nowhere you can run." Her voice was firm, final. Axel's mind raced. He had to do something, anything to regain control. But as he looked back at Zurael, something else caught his attention. There was something about her, something deeper than just a desire for power. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, He didn't fully understand the queen in front of him. He didn't know if he could trust her, but something told him that his fate was tied to hers, whether he liked it or not. And now, he was more trapped than ever. The days aboard the Empress's Wrath felt like weeks. Axel Vance had spent every minute since his capture trying to figure out a way out, but every time he thought he saw an opening, it was quickly shut. Zerael, the cold yet strangely captivating queen, had a way of making him feel both trapped and oddly important. He had never met anyone like her. Her eyes, glowing a deep red, always seemed to be watching him, waiting for him to make a move, and no matter how much he wanted to escape, part of him couldn't shake the nagging thought that maybe there was something more going on here than just manipulation. Zerael's latest proposal only made things worse. She had summoned him to her private chambers again, this time with a new plan. She wanted Axel to help her take down a rebellious star system that had dared to oppose her. The Vorn were an upstart species, and they had been making waves in the galaxy, challenging Zerael's authority. She had no intention of letting them get away with it. But her strategy wasn't just to destroy them. It was to win them over, to make them see her as a powerful but merciful ruler. "You will be my key to victory," Zerael said, her voice low and smooth as she leaned across the table where Axel sat, his hands clenched tightly. "You have a way of thinking that others do not. A strategic mind, Axel. I have seen it. Together, we can crush the Vorn." Axel didn't answer immediately. He was too busy processing the words she'd said. The idea of working with her, helping her conquer yet another part of the galaxy, made his stomach turn. He wasn't a fighter, and he certainly wasn't a conqueror. He had always been a survivor, someone who avoided trouble, not someone who created it. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized there was no easy way out. Zerael wasn't going to let him go. And no matter how hard he tried to resist, he knew deep down that his fate had already been sealed. "I'm not your soldier," Axel finally said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't come here to fight your battles. I'm just a guy trying to get by." Zerael's eyes flashed, her gaze hardening. "You are more than that. I see it in you, Axel. You are clever, resourceful. You have what it takes to help me bring the galaxy under my control. You don't get to choose anymore. I need you." Axel leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. He was starting to feel like he had no choice. She was too powerful, too focused on her goals. And yet, there was something about the way she spoke that made it hard to ignore. Maybe it was the way she believed in him, in his potential, that made him feel like he was more than just a captive. But no matter how he tried to convince himself, the idea of helping Zerael take over the galaxy made his skin crawl. "What's in it for me?" Axel asked, his voice steady but filled with doubt. "You think I'm just going to help you for nothing." Zerael didn't flinch. "You will have more than you could ever imagine. Power, influence, a place by my side. Together, we can change the course of the galaxy. You will be my right hand." Her words hung in the air, thick with promise. Axel felt a strange pull, a part of him tempted by the idea of power. But he quickly pushed that thought away. Power wasn't what he wanted. He just wanted to survive, to get out of this mess. But the more he heard Zerael talk about her vision, the more he began to wonder if there was more to her than the ruthless conqueror he had first assumed. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as evil as she seemed. Maybe, like him, she was just trying to make her way in a broken galaxy. For the first time since his capture, Axel felt a flicker of doubt. He had no idea what was really going on with Zerael, but he knew one thing. He couldn't run forever. He was stuck here, whether he liked it or not. And if he was going to survive, he would have to play the game. But what kind of game was it, really? Was he just a pawn, or could he find a way to turn the tables? "Think it over," Zerael said, standing up. "You have a choice, Axel. You can either help me bring the Vorn to heel, or you can be left behind in the dust." Axel watched her leave, her tall figure disappearing into the shadows of the ship. Alone in the room, He couldn't shake the feeling that his life was no longer just his own. Whatever he decided, there was no turning back now. Axel sat in his quarters aboard the Empress's Wrath, staring at the walls that seemed to close in on him more and more each day. He had spent the last few days avoiding Zuriel's summons, hoping that if he kept his distance, she would forget about him. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The Queen wasn't someone who could be ignored or outwitted. She had a way of making things happen, whether he liked it or not. His mind kept drifting back to the conversation they'd had about the Vorn. Zuriel's offer echoed in his head. Power, influence, a position at her side. It sounded tempting, but Axel wasn't sure if it was a dream or a trap. He didn't trust her fully, but he couldn't deny that there was something about her that pulled him in. She wasn't just a cold-hearted ruler. There were moments when her eyes softened, when she looked at him not as a prisoner but as something more. But no matter how much he wanted to believe there was a chance for him to escape this nightmare, he couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. Zuriel wasn't going to let him go, and the longer he stayed on her ship, the harder it would be to get out. So, Axel did what he did best. He started planning. He needed to find a way out, and soon. The sound of a soft knock at the door broke his train of thought. Axel's hand instinctively went to the blaster he kept hidden in his jacket, but he quickly relaxed. It wasn't a guard. He could tell by the light tap. Slowly, he stood and walked to the door, unsure of who would be on the other side. When he opened it, he was surprised to see a familiar face, Zuriel herself. Her red eyes glowed faintly in the dim light of the hallway. "I knew you would be here," she said with a calm smile. "I've been waiting for you." Axel didn't know what to say. He had half expected her to send a guard, not come herself. But there she was, standing tall and confident, her presence enough to fill the entire hallway. She had a way of making everything around her feel both dangerous and oddly comforting, like she was a force of nature he couldn't avoid. "I've made my decision," Axel said, his voice steady, but his heart was racing. "I'm not going to help you take down the Vorn." Zuriel didn't flinch. She just smiled, a smile that seemed to contain both understanding and a hint of something else, something dangerous. "You think you have a choice," she said softly, "but you don't." Axel felt a chill run down his spine, but he refused to back down. "I didn't sign up for this. I'm not a soldier or some power-hungry pawn. I don't want any part in your wars." Zuriel stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his. "You're already involved, Axel. You were from the moment you activated my signal. Whether you want it or not, you've been chosen. And now, you're mine." The words hit him harder than he expected. He wanted to argue, to fight back, but something in Zuriel's gaze made him hesitate. She wasn't just trying to control him. She was trying to convince him that there was no escape, that he was already too deep in her web. And in that moment, Axel realized something that terrified him. She might be right. "I didn't ask for any of this," Axel muttered, his voice quieter now. "I just wanted to survive. And that's exactly why I need you," Zuriel said, her tone almost gentle, as if she understood. "You're a survivor. You've been through more than most people could ever imagine, and you're still standing. That's what makes you valuable. You won't just follow orders. You'll think for yourself, and that is exactly what I need." Axel was silent, struggling to process her words. He didn't know if he believed her or if she was just using him to further her own agenda. But a small part of him, maybe the part he hated the most, was starting to wonder if she was right. Maybe he did have something to offer. Maybe he could use this to his advantage. Zuriel took a step back, her eyes still locked onto his. "I'm not asking you to be a soldier, Axel. I'm asking you to be my ally. Together, we could accomplish more than you've ever dreamed. You just need to trust me." Axel's mind raced. He had no idea what the future held, but the pull of Zuriel's words was undeniable. She was offering him a chance, maybe not freedom, but something else. A chance to be part of something bigger than himself. He couldn't deny the temptation, but he wasn't ready to surrender just yet. "You'll regret this," Axel said, his voice low but steady. "You're not going to break me." Zurael's smile widened, and for the first time, Axel saw a flicker of something softer in her eyes. "We'll see, Axel. We'll see." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Axel alone with his thoughts. But even as he stood there, uncertainty gnawing at him, a part of him knew that whatever he decided next, there was no going back. His future was tied to Zurael's in ways he couldn't yet understand, and the danger of the path ahead only seemed to grow darker with each passing day. Axel couldn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind kept replaying the conversation with Zurael. Her words haunted him. "You're mine." What did she mean by that? Was it just a power play, or was there something deeper? He wasn't sure, but the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. He couldn't shake the feeling that Zurael wasn't entirely the villain he'd first thought. There was something about her, something both fierce and vulnerable, that made him question everything. The next day, Axel decided to find some answers. He couldn't just sit around, waiting for Zurael to make all the moves. He needed to know what was going on, not just with her, but with the entire galaxy. He knew the Vorn had to be stopped, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to help Zurael bring them down. He needed to understand her plan, her true motives, before he made any decision. He made his way to the ship's command center, hoping to find some clues. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound being the soft hum of the ship's engines. Inside, the command center was a flurry of activity. RAL officers were stationed at various terminals, monitoring the ship's systems and the galaxy beyond. Axel spotted a large holographic map of the galaxy in the center of the room. The glowing dots on the map indicated various planets and systems, most of which were controlled by Zurael. But as Axel examined the map closer, he noticed something odd. A few systems were marked in red, labeled as resistance, including the Vorn star system. But there was another system, one far from the main battlegrounds, that was also highlighted. It was a system that didn't belong to the Queen, and it had a strange energy signature. Axel's curiosity spiked. Before he could investigate further, a voice behind him interrupted his thoughts. "What are you doing here, human?" Axel turned around quickly, his hand instinctively going to the blaster hidden at his side. But when he saw the person standing in the doorway, his hand relaxed. It was Lyra, one of Zurael's closest advisors and a member of the Queen's inner circle. She was tall and graceful, with sharp features and eyes that seemed to see through everything. She had always treated Axel with suspicion, but there was something in her gaze now that made him uneasy. "I'm just looking around," Axel replied, trying to sound casual, trying to understand what's going on. Lyra raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying his excuse. "You're not supposed to be here. You should leave before Zurael finds out." Axel hesitated, but then he decided to push forward. "What's the deal with that system?" He pointed to the one with the strange energy signature on the map. "It's not part of the Queen's empire. What's up there?" Lyra's expression darkened, and for a moment, Axel thought he had crossed a line. But then, to his surprise, she sighed and stepped closer to him, her voice lowering. "That's where Zurael's true interest lies. It's not about the Vorn, not really. It's about what's beyond them. There's a power out there, something ancient, something that could change everything." Axel's heart raced. What kind of power? Lyra's eyes flickered, as if she was deciding how much to reveal. "I don't know, but Zurael does. She's been searching for it for years, and the Vorn are just a distraction. They're a means to an end." Axel felt a chill run down his spine. If Zurael was after something even bigger than galaxy domination, then he was in much deeper than he'd ever imagined. The idea of being part of her plan, of helping her get her hands on something dangerous, made his skin crawl. He had no idea what this ancient power was, but it sounded like something that could tear the galaxy apart. "So, what does she want me for?" Axel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm not a strategist. I'm just some guy. Lyra looked at him intently, as if she was weighing his worth. You're more important than you think. Zuriel sees something in you, something she needs. Maybe it's your survival instinct. Maybe it's your ability to think in ways others can't. But she's not going to stop until she gets what she wants, Axel. And you're caught in the middle of it. Axel's mind raced as he processed her words. He had known that Zuriel was dangerous. But this was beyond anything he had imagined. He wasn't just a pawn in her game. He was part of something far larger, something that could have consequences far beyond the galaxy he knew. Thanks for the warning, Axel muttered, his voice heavy with the weight of the situation. Lyra's lips twitched into a small smile. It's not a warning. It's the truth. And you'd better start deciding which side you're on. With that, she turned and walked out of the command center, leaving Axel standing there with more questions than answers. He had a feeling his next move would decide everything, whether he would become part of Zuriel's empire or something else entirely. The next few days felt like a whirlwind to Axel. Ever since his conversation with Lyra, he couldn't shake the weight of what she had told him. Zuriel's ambitions were bigger than he had ever imagined. He had thought the Queen was only interested in conquering the galaxy, but now he understood that there was something more. A mysterious power, something ancient and far beyond the Vorn rebellion. What was it? And why did Zuriel need him? He couldn't stop questioning everything. Zuriel hadn't called him to her chamber since their last meeting, but Axel knew it wouldn't be long before she did. Her words had been clear. He was part of her plan now, whether he wanted to be or not. Every time he thought about trying to escape, the feeling of being trapped tightened around him. The ship was vast, but its walls felt like they were closing in on him more every day. He had been running out of options and out of time. One evening, as Axel walked the corridors of the Empress's Wrath, he passed by a large viewing window. The stars outside seemed endless, beautiful in their stillness. He stopped, staring at the glowing points of light that stretched out before him. He had always loved the stars, always found comfort in their constancy. But now, as he looked out at them, he couldn't help but wonder what Zuriel saw when she looked up. Did she see a galaxy waiting to be conquered, or did she see something else? His thoughts were interrupted when a voice called out from behind him. You seem lost in thought. Axel turned around, his heart skipping a beat. There stood Zuriel, as composed and regal as always, her fiery red eyes glowing softly in the dim light of the corridor. She wore her usual armor, but today it seemed even more imposing, as though it carried the weight of 1,000 battles. Her presence was undeniable, commanding, and for a moment, Axel felt like a mere speck in the vastness of the universe. I was just thinking, Axel said, trying to sound casual, though his heart was racing. About everything. About the plan. The Vorn. And, well, about you. Zuriel tilted her head slightly, studying him with that unsettling intensity. And what did you decide, Axel? His pulse quickened. Was this it? Was she going to force him into making a choice? He had no idea what she expected from him, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. He had to hold his ground. I don't know if I can help you with this, Axel said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The Vorn are one thing, but this, whatever you're after, it's beyond what I'm willing to be a part of. Zuriel's expression softened, though there was still an edge to her gaze. I see, she said, her voice low. You don't understand yet. You think you have a choice, but you don't, Axel. The galaxy isn't a place for people who don't make decisions. You're already tangled in my web, whether you like it or not. Axel didn't say anything, his mind racing. Could he really escape from her grasp? Was it even possible? Or was he too far gone, already caught in whatever game Zuriel was playing? Zuriel stepped closer, her presence nearly overwhelming. She lowered her voice, making it almost a whisper. You think you're the only one who has choices to make. I have lived my life fighting for power, Axel. It's not something I can just turn off. You are more important than you realize, and you'll understand that soon enough." Her words sent a chill down his spine. The way she spoke, as if everything was already decided, made Axel feel like he had no say in his future. She was right about one thing. The stakes were higher than he could have imagined. Before Axel could respond, Zuriel reached out, her fingers brushing against his arm lightly. "But I don't want you to think I'm forcing you into something you don't want. I'm offering you a chance, Axel. A chance to stand beside me, to help shape the future of this galaxy." Axel's breath hitched. Was she being sincere? Was she offering him something real, or was it just another way to trap him? His mind raced, trying to process everything. He had never wanted to be a part of any empire. And yet, here he was, caught in the middle of a war for power and control. "I don't know if I can trust you," Axel said, his voice quieter now, as though he was finally admitting the truth to himself. "But I also don't know if I have a choice." Zuriel smiled softly, a rare gesture that caught him off guard. It wasn't the cold, calculating smile he had come to expect. This was something different. "You always have a choice, Axel. But sometimes, choosing is the hardest part." Axel stared at her, trying to read her expression. Was this a game to her, or was there something more? He didn't have the answers, but one thing was certain. His next move would be the most important one yet. Whatever happened, he knew that his life would never be the same again. Axel couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking on the edge of a cliff. One wrong move and he could fall into the unknown. After his conversation with Zuriel, everything felt different. He hadn't expected her to be so calm. She wasn't the ruthless conqueror he had imagined, nor was she the cold, calculating queen he had been led to believe. There was something more to her, something he wasn't sure he understood yet. The following days were tense. Axel spent more time in his quarters, trying to make sense of everything. Zuriel's words haunted him, echoing in his mind at all hours. "You think you have a choice, but you don't. You are mine." What did she mean by that? Was she just trying to control him, or was there something deeper at play? One evening, after a long day of avoiding her, Axel found himself standing in front of the door to Zuriel's chambers. He had no idea why he had come here. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was fear. He didn't know. All he knew was that something inside him was pushing him to find answers. He couldn't stay in the dark forever. He knocked, his hand trembling slightly, and before he could pull his fist away, the door slid open with a soft hiss. There stood Zuriel, looking as regal and unapproachable as always, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. "You've been avoiding me," she said, her voice smooth but with an edge of something else, something he couldn't quite place. Axel swallowed hard. I needed time to think." He hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The tension between them was thick, almost suffocating. There was something magnetic about her, something that made him want to stay, to learn more, but at the same time, he could feel the danger in her every word. She wasn't just a queen. She was a force of nature, a person who didn't allow anyone to stand in her way. "Why me?" Axel finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you need me? You could have anyone. You have all the power in the galaxy. So why me?" Zuriel stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. Her red eyes seemed to glow brighter as she looked at him, almost as if she was studying him. "Because you're different," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You're not like the others. You've survived when others would have given up. You've seen things, done things that have shaped you into someone who doesn't just follow orders. You think for yourself, Axel, and that's what I need. A mind that can think beyond what's in front of them." Axel swallowed, trying to process her words. It was true. He had always been the type to question everything, to challenge authority. But this was bigger than anything he had ever dealt with. He was caught in the web of a queen who was willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. And now, she was offering him a seat at her side. "Why are you telling me this?" Axel asked, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "What do you want me to do?" Zuriel didn't answer immediately. She moved past him, her footsteps echoing in the quiet room. She stopped in front of the window, staring out at the stars as if she were contemplating something far beyond him. "You're not just a pawn, Axel. I could have chosen anyone to help me take down the Vorn, but you have potential. You're the key to something greater, something that can change the fate of the entire galaxy." Axel's heart pounded in his chest. "What do you mean?" Zuriel turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not just fighting the Vorn for power, Axel. I'm fighting for survival. There's an ancient force out there, something powerful enough to tip the balance in our favor. The Vorn are just the beginning. What I'm after is much more dangerous, and I need someone who understands what's at stake." Axel was silent for a moment, trying to comprehend what she was saying. An ancient force, something powerful enough to change everything. He had never heard of anything like that. It sounded like a legend, a myth, but if Zuriel believed it was real, then maybe it was. And maybe she was right. Maybe this wasn't just about saving the galaxy from the Vorn. Maybe it was about something much larger than that. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Axel said finally, his voice low. "I didn't sign up for any of this. I just want to survive. I just want to get out." Zuriel's gaze softened for a brief moment, but then it hardened again. "You don't get to choose, Axel. You're already in this. And whether you want it or not, we're in this together." The weight of her words settled over him like a thick fog. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear. Zuriel wasn't just offering him a chance to be her ally. She was pulling him into something far bigger and far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. And now, there was no turning back. Axel spent the next few days in a daze, his mind constantly turning over everything Zuriel had said. The weight of her words echoed in his ears. "You're already in this, and whether you want it or not, we're in this together." There was no escape, no way out. The thought of being pulled deeper into Zuriel's plans, whatever they might be, gnawed at him. But something about her, the way she spoke, the way she seemed to understand him in a way no one else ever had, kept him tethered to her. He couldn't deny it any longer. There was a part of him that was intrigued, drawn to the power she wielded. Zuriel wasn't just any queen. She was something else, something that made Axel question his own instincts. She was dangerous, but she was also intelligent, calculating, and somehow that made him trust her, at least a little. She had revealed a sliver of the truth, but he knew there was more she wasn't saying. He needed to find out exactly what that was. Axel's curiosity finally led him to the heart of the ship, deep inside its labyrinthine halls. There he found himself standing before an ancient door, unlike anything he'd seen before. The door was made of dark, polished metal, with intricate symbols engraved along its edges. It pulsed with an energy that seemed to hum in the air, as though something powerful lay just beyond it. Axel knew, without a doubt, that this was the heart of Zuriel's plan. The ancient power she had mentioned, the force that could change everything. It had to be behind this door. He stood there for a long moment, his hand hovering over the door's control panel. What if he was making a mistake? What if the answers he sought would only lead to more danger? But he couldn't turn back now. The need to know burned in his chest, like a fire that wouldn't be put out. With a deep breath, he pressed the button. The door slid open slowly, revealing a vast chamber beyond. The walls were lined with strange, glowing crystals, and in the center of the room stood a large pedestal, upon which rested a mysterious object. It was unlike anything Axel had ever seen. An orb, its surface shimmering with an eerie, otherworldly light. The moment Axel laid eyes on it, he felt a rush of energy surge through him, like an electric shock that vibrated down to his bones. This was it, the power Zuriel had been seeking. But as he stepped closer, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Curious, aren't we?" Axel spun around, his heart racing. Standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, was Zurael. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that almost looked like approval. "I told you this was important," Zurael continued. Axel stared at the orb, his mind racing. He had thought Zurael wanted this power for domination. But this was something else entirely. She wasn't just after control. She wanted to understand, to learn. "But why me?" Axel asked, his voice hoarse. "What do you need me for?" Zurael took a step closer to him, her eyes never leaving his. "Because you have the potential. Axel, you see things differently. You've already proven that you can handle the chaos that comes with this power. I need someone like you. Someone who can help me unlock the secrets of the orb." Axel felt a chill run through him. She was asking for his help, but not in the way he had expected. He had assumed she was using him as a pawn in her empire-building game. But this was different. She wasn't just offering him power. She was offering him knowledge, something even more dangerous. But was he willing to take that risk? He glanced at the orb again, its eerie glow pulling at him like a magnet. The temptation to learn, to uncover the truth behind the galaxy's mysteries, was almost too strong to ignore. But at the same time, he knew the dangers of pursuing such knowledge. There was always a price. Zurael seemed to sense his hesitation. She stepped closer, her voice softer now. "I'm not asking you to be mine forever, Axel. I'm asking you to help me unlock something that could change everything. Together, we could reshape the galaxy. But only if you trust me." Axel's heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Every instinct told him to walk away, to escape from all of this before it was too late. But another part of him, the part that had always yearned for more, wanted to dive deeper, to see what lay beneath the surface. He finally looked at Zurael, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "And if I say yes, what happens next?" Zurael smiled, but it wasn't the cold, calculating smile he had grown used to. This was different. This was genuine, almost warm. "Then we begin, Axel. We begin the journey to uncover the truth, and with it, the power to change everything." Axel took a deep breath, his mind made up. There was no going back now. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life was about to change forever. The decision was made. Axel had stepped into a world he couldn't fully understand, and now there was no turning back. As he stood before the glowing orb, the weight of his choice settled over him like a heavy cloak. Zurael had offered him a chance to uncover the greatest secret in the galaxy, but with that came a burden he wasn't sure he was ready for. The mysteries of the past, the power of the orb. It was more than he had ever imagined, and the consequences of it were terrifying. Zurael's gaze never left him, her eyes as intense as ever. She was waiting for him to make the next move, to confirm that he was truly committed to this journey. Axel swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had agreed to help her, but now, standing on the edge of the unknown, the reality of his decision was sinking in. What if they were wrong? What if they unleashed something they couldn't control? "You look uncertain," Zurael said, her voice soft, but laced with an undeniable authority. "You can still walk away, Axel. I won't hold it against you. But I believe you're ready. You've always had the strength to face the unknown." Axel looked up at her, his heart beating faster. He didn't want to back down. Not now. This was his chance to make a difference, to be part of something bigger than himself. And yet, something in his gut told him that this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead would change him forever. "I'm not walking away," Axel said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm in this with you. We'll see it through." Zurael's lips curled into a rare smile, one that seemed to soften her usually cold demeanor. "Good. We'll need your strength, Axel. There's no going back now." With a final glance at the orb, Axel stepped forward. As his fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of energy shot through him. and for a moment he was blind. The world around him blurred, and all he could see were flashes of images, of ancient cities, wars that had shaped civilizations, and faces of beings he had never seen before. It was as if the galaxy itself was trying to communicate with him, its history unfolding in an instant. The light finally faded, and Axel stumbled back, his head spinning. He had seen things, too many things, images of power, of knowledge, of a force that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. His mind raced to process what he had just witnessed. The orb wasn't just a source of power. It was a gateway to something much larger, something that could change the very fabric of reality itself. Zuriel stood beside him, her eyes glowing with a sense of understanding. "It's inside you now," she said, her voice steady. "You've seen it. The truth, the knowledge of the ancients. We have to protect it. If the wrong hands get hold of it." She didn't finish her sentence, but the implication was clear. Axel nodded, his thoughts still reeling. He had always been just a survivor, someone trying to get by. But now he was part of something far greater than he could have imagined. The power, the responsibility, it was all in his hands. And with that came the knowledge that he couldn't walk away. Not anymore. "We'll protect it," Axel said, his voice firm with newfound resolve. "Together." Zuriel's smile grew, this time filled with something deeper, satisfaction, perhaps, or a shared understanding. Yes, together. As they stood there, looking at the orb that had changed everything, Axel couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. The galaxy was at a crossroads, and he was now an unwilling player in a game that stretched across the stars. Zuriel had promised him knowledge, but what lay ahead wasn't just about learning the past, it was about shaping the future. And as the pulse of the orb thrummed beneath his fingers, Axel knew that the path he had chosen would be full of dangers, sacrifices, and challenges. But it was also the path to something more, to a new beginning, a new chapter in the galaxy's story. And no matter what happened next, Axel was ready to face it. He had come too far to turn back now.